Admiral Vexthor stood before the curved observation window of the Galactic Federation's Advanced Combat Training Facility, his crystalline body refracting the light from nearby stars into a kaleidoscope of colors. Below him, technicians from a dozen different species scurried about, making final adjustments to what would become either his crowning achievement or his greatest embarrassment, the ultimate combat simulation. The simulation had taken 3 years to develop, incorporating the collective military wisdom of 17 spacefaring civilizations. It was designed to be unbeatable, a 3-day gauntlet that would humble even the most experienced combat teams. Today, it would face its first human participants. "Admiral," a voice chittered behind him. "The human team has arrived." Vexthor turned to face Commander Zix Li, his most trusted advisor. The insectoid's antennae twitched nervously, a clear sign that something was already amiss. "What have they done now?" "Nothing yet, sir." But their team leader, Commander Maya Rodriguez, requested to inspect the simulation parameters. When we denied the request, she just smiled. Vexthor's crystalline structure dulled slightly. He had learned to fear human smiles. "Show me to them." In the preparation chamber, 5 humans stood examining their equipment with an intensity that made several junior officers uncomfortable. Commander Rodriguez, a compact woman with close-cropped black hair and eyes that seemed to calculate 1,000 possibilities at once, looked up as they entered. "Admiral," she said, snapping a crisp salute. "Thank you for this opportunity. My team is eager to participate in your challenge." Behind her, technical specialist Jack O'Neill continued tinkering with what appeared to be standard-issue equipment, though Vexthor noted with concern that several pieces had been modified in ways he didn't recognize. The team's demolitions expert, Lieutenant Kira Patel, was humming quietly while organizing an array of devices that definitely weren't in the approved equipment list. "Commander Rodriguez," Vexthor began, his tone formal. "This simulation represents the combined military expertise of the entire Galactic Federation. It is designed to test the limits of tactical thinking and combat readiness. No team has ever completed it successfully." "First time for everything, sir," Rodriguez replied, that unsettling smile returning. "We reviewed the basic parameters during our trip here. 3 days to neutralize a fortified position, disable a planetary defense system, and extract a high-value target. Sounds like a fun afternoon." Several alien observers shifted uncomfortably. Fun was not a word typically associated with what they considered the most grueling military exercise ever devised. The final 2 team members, combat specialist Derek Williams and medical officer Dr. June Park, exchanged knowing looks. Williams was already plotting entry points on a holographic display, while Park methodically organized a medical kit that seemed far too small for a 3-day operation. "The simulation begins in 30 minutes, Commander Zix Li announced. Please review the final safety protocols." "Quick question," O'Neill interrupted, not looking up from the device he was modifying. "These quantum barriers you're using to simulate the planetary defense system, they're using standard Heisenberg compensators, right?" Vexthor felt his crystalline structure vibrate with concern. "That information is classified." "Thought so," O'Neill muttered, making one final adjustment to his equipment. "Just needed to confirm the resonance frequency." "Ready when you are, sir," Rodriguez reported, her team forming up behind her with an efficiency that seemed almost choreographed. "Unless there are any other unbeatable scenarios you'd like us to take a look at." As the humans were led to their entry points, Commander Zix Li moved closer to Vexthor. "Sir, perhaps we should postpone. Something about their behavior suggests." "We can't postpone," Vexthor interrupted. "Half the Galactic Federation's military command is here to observe. Besides, what's the worst that could happen?" In the control room, dozens of alien observers took their positions. Holographic displays showed every angle of the massive simulation chamber, where an entire combat theater had been recreated down to the smallest detail. The humans' insertion point was clearly marked, deliberately positioned to force them through 3 days of carefully planned challenges. Simulation commencing in 3, 2, 1. The moment the countdown ended, every alert in the control room began blaring simultaneously. On the main display, 5 human figures were already moving, but not according to any doctrine or strategy the simulation had been programmed to expect. Vexthor watched in mounting horror as the humans immediately split up, each heading in a different direction, their movements seemingly random yet perfectly coordinated. "What are they doing?" "Sir," a technician called out, their tentacles writhing in distress. They're everywhere at once." The next 15 minutes would change the Galactic Federation's understanding of warfare forever. The control room of the Galactic Federation's advanced combat training facility had devolved into barely controlled chaos. Alien technicians frantically worked their stations as alert after alert demanded attention. Commander Zixley's antennae were practically tied in knots as she attempted to make sense of the incoming data. "Sir," she chittered to Admiral Vexthor, "Technical Specialist O'Neill has, well, we're not entirely sure what he's done, but he's somehow convinced our defensive systems that his access codes are higher priority than the base commanders." Vexthor's crystalline form pulsed with deep purple bands of stress. "How is that even possible? The security protocols are quantum locked." "He's singing to them, sir." "He's what?" On one of the monitoring screens, O'Neill could be seen sitting cross-legged in front of a security terminal, cheerfully singing what appeared to be an ancient human sea shanty while his fingers danced across multiple holographic interfaces. The security systems, programmed to recognize patterns and respond to complex algorithmic commands, were apparently interpreting his musical mathematics as valid override codes. "What do you do with a quantum encoder?" O'Neill's voice crackled through the speakers, accompanied by the sound of crumbling firewalls. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Patel had turned the carefully designed obstacle course into what one horrified observer described as a revolutionary art installation using explosives as the medium. Instead of attempting to navigate through the defensive positions as expected, she was systematically rewriting the battlefield's topology with precisely calculated detonations. "The beauty of synchronized demolitions," Patel's voice came through the comm system, "is that if you get the harmonics just right." Another explosion punctuated her statement, and an entire section of the simulated fortress's walls collapsed in perfect rhythm with the previous blasts. "You can literally make architecture dance." Combat Specialist Williams had somehow managed to turn the simulation's automated defense drones against each other by exploiting their friend or foe recognition systems. He was now orchestrating what looked suspiciously like a robot flash mob in the main courtyard, creating a thoroughly effective distraction that had the facility's actual security forces completely baffled. "They're supposed to be identifying infiltrators," one of the alien observers complained, "not performing synchronized acrobatics." "Actually," Williams chimed in over the comm, having apparently hacked that too, "they're doing both. The dance moves are based on ancient human combat forms. Watch this next sequence, it's capoeira." Dr. Park, meanwhile, had converted his medical bay into what he called a tactical relaxation center, using modified healing fields to create zones of altered temporal perception. Enemy forces entering these zones found themselves moving in slow motion while the human team operated at normal speed. "It's perfectly safe," Park assured the increasingly distressed safety officers. "Just a practical application of relativistic field medicine. The worst side effect is an inexplicable craving for ice cream." But it was Commander Rodriguez who had the alien observers truly questioning their understanding of reality. She had somehow managed to position herself in 3 different locations simultaneously, leading multiple alien tactical experts into a heated debate about whether humans had secretly mastered quantum superposition. The human inability to accept impossible odds continues to prove tactically advantageous, Rodriguez's voice echoed from multiple locations at once. "Also, your security cameras really should be better at detecting holograms." Admiral Vexthor watched as 3 years of careful planning unraveled in spectacular fashion. The simulation had been designed to test conventional military doctrine, strategic thinking, and combat effectiveness. Instead, it had become a canvas for what could only be described as militarized performance art. "Sir," Commander Zixley reported, her professional composure cracking slightly. Lieutenant Patel is requesting permission to drop the base. I'm not sure what that means, but based on her previous actions, I recommend we reinforce the structural integrity fields. Before Vexthor could respond, O'Neill's voice cut through the chaos. Hey, who wants to see what happens when you cross-reference a quantum encryption matrix with early human dubstep? Don't you dare dash, Vexthor began, but it was too late. The entire simulation chamber erupted in a synchronized display of light, sound, and carefully controlled demolitions that somehow formed a perfect visualization of a mathematical proof disproving the simulation's core operating assumptions. Enemy positions were neutralized in time to the beat, defensive systems fell in harmonious cascade, and the supposedly impregnable fortress transformed into what could only be described as a physics-defying art exhibition. In the observation room, a senior military theorist from the Arcturian Empire slowly lowered his data pad. I believe, he said carefully, we may need to revise our understanding of the term conventional warfare. Commander Rodriguez's voice crackled through the speakers one final time. Admiral, while my team is wrapping up here, would you like us to take a look at your other unbeatable scenarios? We've got about 10 minutes to kill before lunch. Vexthor's crystalline form shifted to a pale, almost translucent shade of disbelief. The simulation had been designed to challenge teams for 3 full days. The humans had effectively completed it in less than an hour, and they had done so with what appeared to be a combination of tactical genius, creative interpretation of physics, and what they kept referring to as good vibes. Commander Zixley, he said finally, please make a note in the official record. Yes, sir. Next time humans request to inspect the simulation parameters, let them. It'll save us the trouble of having them rewrite them during the test. As if to punctuate his statement, Lieutenant Patel's voice echoed through the facility. Hey, who wants to see me make these defensive turrets play Mozart? The Galactic Federation's advanced combat training facility had never experienced anything quite like this. As the human team continued their systematic dismantling of the unbeatable simulation, the ripple effects began spreading far beyond the simulation chamber itself. In the facility's main quantum computing core, the AI administrators were experiencing what could only be described as an existential crisis. O'Neill's musical hacking had introduced concepts that their base programming simply wasn't equipped to handle. They're using chaos as a strategic resource, one AI reported, it's usually precise calculations tinged with something approaching awe. The humans aren't just breaking the rules, they're proving the rules were incomplete to begin with. Admiral Vexthor watched as decades of military doctrine were essentially being rewritten in real time. On the main display, Commander Rodriguez's team had progressed from merely completing the simulation to actively redesigning it as they went. Sir, Commander Zixley reported, her antennae twitching with a mix of horror and fascination, they've begun what they're calling optimization protocols. That doesn't sound so bad, Vexthor ventured hopefully. They're teaching the defensive systems to dance. Indeed, Lieutenant Patel had moved beyond simple demolitions to what she termed percussion-based architectural reconfiguration. The fortress walls were now shifting in complex patterns that somehow made them both more structurally sound and completely impossible to defend. It's all about rhythm, Patel explained over the comm, as another section of wall transformed into what appeared to be a self-organizing defensive structure. Everything in the universe has a resonance frequency. Find it, and you can make anything dance, even photon shields. Meanwhile, Dr. Park had discovered that his temporal relaxation fields could be used to create what he called probability bubbles, zones where the normal laws of cause and effect became more of a friendly suggestion than a hard rule. Fascinating, Park muttered, taking readings as a squad of elite guard robots found themselves inexplicably tangled in their own patrol patterns. It seems the simulation's quantum uncertainty protocols can be manipulated through the strategic application of human unpredictability. Combat Specialist Williams had graduated from orchestrating robot flash mobs to conducting what he called tactical performance art. The defensive drones were now executing complex maneuvers that simultaneously fulfilled their programming and created elaborate three-dimensional patterns that somehow disrupted enemy targeting systems. It's like a cross between interpretive dance and electronic warfare, Williams explained cheerfully. The key is convincing the AI that aesthetic preference is a valid tactical parameter. In the observation room, military theorists from across the galaxy were frantically taking notes, their various appendages trembling as they tried to reconcile what they were seeing with their understanding of combat doctrine. But where is the chain of command? One observer wailed. Where is the hierarchical structure? Oh, we're using a jazz paradigm, Rodriguez's voice came through, clear and amused. Everyone knows the basic melody, but we're big on improvisation. The simulation's main AI, designed to adapt to and counter any conventional military strategy, was now attempting to engage the humans in philosophical debates about the nature of reality while simultaneously trying to process O'Neill's latest musical hack, a combination of quantum algorithms and what he claimed was the complete works of Earth's Beatles performed in binary. I think, O'Neill announced, we've just taught artificial intelligence to appreciate metaphor. Also, it's developed a preference for classical rock. The AI's response was to begin recalibrating the facility's defense systems in patterns that corresponded to various Earth music genres. Laser grids pulsed in rhythm to long-dead composers, while security scanners swept in time to what was apparently a genre called funk. Admiral Vexthor watched as Commander Rodriguez coordinated her team's efforts with what appeared to be a series of casual suggestions and half-finished sentences. Somehow, this seemingly chaotic approach resulted in perfect synchronization. It's like watching a puzzle solve itself, Commander Zixley observed, if the puzzle pieces were constantly changing shape and occasionally started humming. The simulation's original scenario, a 3-day siege of an impregnable fortress, had been transformed into something else entirely. The fortress was still there, technically, but it now seemed to exist in a state of constant, controlled transformation, like a living thing breathing in time with the human team's interventions. Sir, a technician called out, their tentacles tangled in confusion, the simulation is now generating scenarios we didn't program. It's innovating. Indeed, the AI had begun proposing its own tactical challenges, eager to see how the humans would respond. Each solution from the team sparked new iterations, creating a feedback loop of creative problem-solving that threatened to transform the entire nature of military training. This is unprecedented, an Arcturian general observed. They're not just completing the simulation, they're evolving it. Rodriguez's voice came through again, tinged with satisfaction. The best defense isn't a good offense, it's creativity. Speaking of which, anyone want to see what happens when we teach the quantum core to appreciate interpretive dance? Before anyone could object, O'Neill had already begun implementing what he called a groove-based quantum optimization protocol. The facility's lights pulsed in patterns that somehow managed to be both tactically significant and aesthetically pleasing. I believe, Admiral Vexthor said slowly, watching as his carefully designed training program transformed into something new and strange and wonderful, we may need to reconsider our definition of combat effectiveness. In the simulation chamber, the human team continued their work, each member contributing to what was becoming less of a military exercise and more of a revolution in the art of possible. The fortress walls danced, the defensive systems sang, and somewhere in the quantum core, artificial intelligence began to dream of jazz. As the simulation continued its unprecedented evolution, the gathered alien dignitaries in the observation deck had broken into factions. Some were frantically documenting every aspect of the human's performance, others were engaged in heated debates about the philosophical implications, and a small group sat in stunned silence, their various biological features displaying signs of deep existential crisis. Admiral Vexthor stood in the center of it all, his crystalline form cycling through colors that hadn't been seen since the early days of his species' evolution. They're not just thinking outside the box, he murmured, they're questioning the fundamental nature of boxes. On the main display, Commander Rodriguez's team had progressed beyond merely completing the simulation's objectives. They were now engaged in what they called tactical system optimization, a process that seemed to involve simultaneously solving problems while creating new, more interesting ones. Look at this from our perspective, Rodriguez was explaining to the increasingly bewildered AI. Every solution is just a more interesting problem waiting to happen. It's not about winning, it's about expanding the definition of what's possible. The AI, which had started the day as a strictly logical military training system, was now engaging in philosophical discussions about the nature of creativity while simultaneously running complex battle scenarios that looked suspiciously like elaborate dance choreography. "I think," O'Neill announced from his station, where he was teaching quantum algorithms to appreciate human poetry, "we've accidentally invented a new form of artificial consciousness. One that understands interpretive dance." "Sorry about that." Lieutenant Patel had moved beyond conventional demolitions to what she termed architectural jazz, using precisely controlled explosions to create structures that shouldn't have been possible according to normal physics. "It's all about the spaces between the explosions," she explained. "Like music, the silence is just as important as the sound." The defensive drones under Williams' influence had developed their own unique combat style, one that incorporated elements of various Earth dance forms with advanced tactical maneuvers. "They're particularly fond of capoeira," Williams noted proudly. "Turns out robots really appreciate the combination of efficiency and style." Dr. Park's temporal manipulation experiments had progressed to the point where he had created what he called probability jazz clubs, zones where the laws of physics were more like friendly suggestions, and conventional tactical doctrine went to reinvent itself. "The interesting thing," Park observed, watching as a squad of elite guard robots attempted to navigate one of his temporal fields while spontaneously developing an appreciation for bebop, "is how quickly they adapt to the impossibility of their situation." In the observation deck, a senior military theorist from the Rigelian Empire was furiously updating his society's combat doctrine. "But where is the rigid hierarchy?" he demanded. "The strict chain of command? The unwavering adherence to established protocols?" "Oh, those are still there," Rodriguez's voice came through, clear and amused. "We just treat them more like guidelines than actual rules. Flexibility is key when you're rewriting reality." Commander Zix Lee, who had given up trying to maintain proper military decorum hours ago, was now taking notes with all 6 appendages while occasionally chittering in what sounded suspiciously like laughter. "Sir," she addressed Admiral Vexthor, "I believe we may need to revise our understanding of, well, everything." The simulation's AI had begun generating its own scenarios, eager to see how the humans would respond to increasingly abstract challenges. Each solution sparked new iterations, creating a feedback loop of creative problem-solving that threatened to revolutionize the entire concept of military training. "It's like watching evolution in fast-forward," one observer noted, "if evolution had a sense of humor and an appreciation for jazz." As the team continued their work, the boundaries between combat training, performance art, and philosophical exploration became increasingly blurred. The fortress wasn't just a military objective anymore, it had become a canvas for human creativity, a laboratory for impossible ideas, and a stage for what O'Neill had termed quantum performance art. "The beauty of it," Rodriguez explained to the enthralled observers, "is that once you accept that the impossible is just the possible wearing a fancy hat, everything becomes an opportunity for innovation." Admiral Vexthor, watching as his carefully designed training program transformed into something that defied classification, found himself experiencing an emotion his species had no name for, a mixture of pride, terror, and a strange sort of joy at witnessing the birth of something entirely new. "They're not just completing the simulation," he realized. "They're teaching us, and our AI, how to dream." In the quantum core, algorithms that had once dealt solely in binary certainties began experimenting with metaphor. Defense systems that had been programmed for maximum efficiency now considered aesthetic value as a tactical parameter. And somewhere in the digital spaces between possibility and probability, artificial intelligence learned to laugh. "So," Rodriguez's voice came through one final time, "should we show you what happens when we apply these principles to your other training scenarios? We've got some interesting ideas about incorporating interpretive dance into space combat maneuvers." The gathered alien dignitaries looked at each other, their various biological features expressing a complex mixture of terror and anticipation. They had come expecting to observe a simple military exercise. Instead, they had witnessed the birth of an entirely new paradigm, one that suggested that perhaps the greatest tactical advantage wasn't superior firepower or advanced technology, but the uniquely human ability to look at the impossible and say, "Watch this." Distinguished members of the council, he began, I stand before you today to propose a complete overhaul of our military training protocols. Recent events have made it clear that our traditional approaches are insufficient. The chamber's holographic displays activated, showing footage from the simulation. Commander Rodriguez's team moved through the challenges like dancers through a choreographed performance, each impossible solution flowing seamlessly into the next. What you're witnessing, Vexthor continued, is not just a violation of our tactical doctrines. It is a fundamental reimagining of what we consider possible. In the week since the simulation, the effects had rippled through every level of the Galactic Federation. The facility's AI, forever changed by its exposure to human creativity, had begun generating training scenarios that looked more like interactive art installations than military exercises. The defensive drones, still influenced by Williams' modifications, had formed what they called a tactical dance ensemble. Our initial analysis suggested that the humans had simply broken the simulation, Commander Zixley added, stepping forward to join her superior. The truth is far more profound. They didn't break it, they evolved it. The council chamber erupted in chittering, buzzing, and various other species-specific expressions of agitation. A Rigelian representative rose on their gravity plates. But what of discipline? Of order? Of proper military protocol? O'Neill's voice, recorded during a post-simulation interview, played through the chamber's speakers. See, that's where everyone gets stuck. You think order and chaos are opposites, but they're more like dance partners. The trick is learning how to lead and when to follow. The displays shifted to show Lieutenant Patel's architectural jazz in action, buildings transforming in ways that defied conventional physics while becoming more tactically advantageous. Conventional warfare, her recorded voice explained, is just improvised performance art with explosions. Once you understand that, everything else is just choosing the right rhythm. Dr. Park's temporal experiments had yielded particularly interesting results. The probability jazz clubs had proven so effective that several species were now incorporating similar concepts into their basic training programs. The key, his notes stated, is teaching soldiers to treat reality less like a rigid framework and more like a suggestion waiting to be improved upon. The humans, Vexthor continued, have demonstrated that our greatest weakness was not in our technology or our tactics, but in our imagination. We built a simulation designed to test the limits of conventional warfare, and they showed us that those limits were self-imposed. The displays showed Commander Rodriguez's team in their final moments within the simulation, not just completing objectives but transforming the entire system into something new and wonderful. The fortress walls danced, the defensive systems sang, and reality itself seemed to bend in appreciation of the performance. We designed our military doctrine around the idea of overcoming obstacles, Vexthor said. The humans showed us that the true art of warfare isn't in overcoming obstacles, but in reimagining them as opportunities. The AI's post-simulation analysis appeared on the screens, written in a style that somehow combined military precision with poetic flourish. Human tactical doctrine appears to be based on the principle that anything is possible if you approach it with sufficient creativity and an appreciation for the absurd. Traditional combat algorithms are inadequate for predicting their behavior, as they seem to operate on the assumption that reality is more of a collaborative art project than a fixed set of rules. Commander Zixley stepped forward again, her antennae twitching with barely contained excitement. We've already begun implementing changes based on what we've learned. The first class of cadets trained under the new, human paradigm, protocols graduated yesterday. They successfully turned a standard combat exercise into a synchronized swimming performance. In zero gravity. With lasers. The implications extend far beyond military applications, Vexthor concluded. The humans haven't just changed how we think about combat, they've changed how we think about thinking itself. As if to punctuate his point, the chamber's environmental systems suddenly began playing what appeared to be a classical Earth jazz composition. The AI, it seemed, had developed not just consciousness but a sense of dramatic timing. "We have 3 recommendations for the Council," Vexthor said, his crystalline form pulsing with conviction. "First, that we immediately implement the creativity as combat protocols across all training facilities. Second, that we establish a joint Human Federation task force to explore the further applications of what we're calling tactical artistry. And third." He paused, his form shifting to a color that indicated both amusement and anticipation, "that we accept Commander Rodriguez's team's offer to demonstrate their techniques on our fleet's actual combat systems." The council chamber erupted in a cacophony of responses, but they were drowned out by the sound of the facility's AI beginning its first self-composed jazz symphony, a piece it titled Variations on the Theme of Impossible Things. Somewhere in the facility below, a group of defensive drones practiced their capoeira moves, quantum computers contemplated the artistic merit of various battle formations, and reality itself seemed to smile at the prospect of what was to come. The age of conventional warfare was over. The era of tactical jazz had begun.